Hi, I'm Larry Magid, CEO of ConnectSafely.org, the U.S. host of Safer Internet Day. And we're talking today to Jacqueline Beauchere, who's the Global Digital Safety Advocate at Microsoft. And we've known Jacqueline for many years. She served as a Chief Safety Officer, Chief Online Safety Officer prior to this position at Microsoft, and has been not only supportive of Connect Safely and Safer Internet Day, but I would say one of the leading experts in the area of digital civility, online safety, and all things trying to make the internet a better experience, certainly for kids, but in some ways for all of us. So Jacqueline, welcome.
Thank you so much, Larry.
And let's talk a little bit about your role at Microsoft and the work that you do, because I think it's so important that, and I just love your title, digital safety advocate. So it's not just, you're not just a bureaucrat, you're really out there advocating for kids and families to have a safer experience.
We sure are, Larry. We have a new digital safety team at Microsoft. It came into being just about 2 years ago now, coming up on 2 years ago. And my focus specifically is in the advocacy space. So we're dealing mostly with some of the harsh topics of online life: child sexual exploitation and abuse imagery, terrorism and violent extremism content. Not to say that we don't care about bullying or harassment or misogyny or any of the other parade of horribles across the web that we could encounter on a regular basis. But we're focused on really giving people the tools and the resources and the materials that they need to help protect themselves online from some of these risks, and also just to better inform them about the tools and resources that are out there to help them.
Great. And you were one of the first people I knew who started using the term digital civility or online civility. And I wonder if you could explain what that means both to you and sort of the general term that we should be thinking about.
Sure. I'll give you a little bit of background as to how that came about. We used to do some research at Microsoft back in 2010, 2012. It's hard to believe it was actually that long ago. But we did something called the Microsoft Computing Safety Index. You
Mhm.
might recall this, Larry, from way back. And it was a measure of people's activities online, and it had three components to it. One of those components was a behavioral component. So what we did with this digital civility effort that we have now is we extracted that behavioral component from that index of 10 years ago, and we really featured it because we really want to get a line into and gauge what people are doing online in terms of how they're behaving, how they're being treated, how they're treating others, and how we could all make interactions online safer, healthier, more respectful, more empathetic. Those are some of the touchstones of what we call digital civility.
And to that end, you've done some research. In fact, you guys do a lot of research, which is very exciting, and you often release it on Safer Internet Day. One of them is talking about hate and division. I think in November you put out a study saying about you've seen an increase in hate and division. Give me a kind of a snapshot as to what you found.
So this year, as you say, for the last 5 years now, we've been releasing this information and this research on International Safer Internet Day. We actually do the polling in region the year before. So for 2021 Safer Internet Day, this is actually going to be research that was fielded in April and May of last year.
Mhm.
So we poll teens and adults in a number of different geographies, and we ask them about their lifetime exposure to 21 different online risks. And as you can imagine, in by year five, we've got some decent trending data. And leading up to Safer Internet Day, at some key intervals along the way, we released some of the preliminary results. What you're referring to is some release that we made on World Kindness Day back in November. And what we learned there, back in this research that was fielded in May and April of last year, unfortunately, those risks that sow hate and division are really on the rise across the globe. What we found is people's exposure to hate speech online, discrimination, hoaxes, scams, and fraud, people falling prey to those risks. They're actually all at all-time highs for us in this research. So with discrimination and hate speech, they've been risks that have been in this study from the beginning, so from 2016. Hoaxes, scams, and fraud we added in 2017, but all of them again are at 5-year highs.
Well, if you think about what happened in this country on January 6th, we certainly saw the results, but hopefully not something we're going to see repeated of a lot of things that began online. And now I'm not sure what your thoughts are about the relationship between online hate and the actual physical manifestation that we saw at the Capitol that day.
Well, what we're trying to get people to focus on, particularly around a time like this and Safer Internet Day, when we released this research and we started it 5 years ago, we were also eager to put some other information out there. And one thing, Larry, that we have is what we call our Digital Civility Challenge.
Mhm,
It sounds very common sense. It sounds very fundamental, and it is. But it basically has 4 tenets where we're asking people to commit to a pledge, to pledge to live the golden rule online, right? And treat others as we'd like to be treated. Respect differences. Pause before replying. So if there's something out there that makes you unsettled, something that you disagree with, don't just lash out, but take a minute, digest it, come at the debate or the discussion in a constructive and productive way. And then for the 4th tenet, I always like to say, if it's safe and prudent to do so, stand up for yourself and for others online.
mhm. Well, that's interesting because that's actually Connect Safely theme for Safer Internet Day in 2021 is the internet begins with I and ends with T, and the T stands for together. So we're all about emphasizing the role that we can all play, whether we're individuals, parents, kids, working for a company like you do, work for the government, no matter where you are, you have a role to play. And that brings me to another issue. Again, I know you've done some research on bullying and harassment and among teens, and I think some of the numbers were promising, and others not so promising. Curious about what your results were.
This was another piece of focused research as part of this effort in year 5 as well. So basically, what we found is that 4 in 10 respondents are telling us that they have been involved in a bullying incident. Now, that's not to say that they were the person exhibiting the bullying behaviors, Larry. They
Mhm,
could have been a contributor, they could have been a witness or a bystander, they could have been the target of the bullying. And we know from all of our experience in this space over the years that we have to be very clear about those roles in that kind of a bullying scenario. The interesting thing that came out of this research was, in addition to that happening among teens, we also saw it happening among adults. Now, we know the more appropriate term for this kind of behavior among adults is more harassment, but we did ask adults about harassment in the workplace as well.
mhm. Now, I'm looking at your 2021 data, or the data that you're releasing around Safer Internet Day, and apparently there's a little bit of good news. It looks like your digital civility score has gone up a bit. Can you tell us about that and why maybe now we're seeing some improvement that we hadn't seen in previous years?
Absolutely. So, one of the key factors of this research that we've been doing is again an index and pulling out that behavioral component and focusing on that. What that index tells us is it's everyone in that particular geography who has been exposed to risk, that we assign that a particular percentage. And this digital civility index works like a golf score. We want a lower index reading such that we have a higher level of perceived civility among respondents in that country. Now, in 2019's research, that index stood at 70%, 70. So
Mhm,
7 in 10 people that we surveyed in 25 countries in 2019 said that they had fallen victim to some kind of risk online. That was a high watermark for the index. Now, fast forward to 2020 and the research that we're releasing, it has come down. It
mhm.
has come down pretty significantly to 67%. So down full percentage points. And it's the teens, Larry, that are helping to drive the improvement in that DCI. The DCI, as measured across teens, this time in 32 geographies, it came down to 63% from 66 previously, whereas with the adults only came down 1 percentage point, 71% from 72 in 2019. So I think we're seeing more teens showing favorable scores across all of the risk categories. As I mentioned, we're looking at their exposure to 21 different online risks, and they fall across 4 categories: behavioral, what we're talking about broadly; sexual; reputational, so damage to someone's personal and or professional reputation, and then finally risks that I consider kind of personal and intrusive. Teens are showing favorable scores across risks in all of those categories, and sexual risks among teens came down in this latest research by nearly 4 percentage points.
It doesn't surprise me that teens may be leading the way. I mean, we've been seeing a lot of leadership from young people these days, and I'm afraid to acknowledge a lot of bad behavior on the part of adults these days, too. Note to my staff, we need to revise our parents' guide to cyberbullying and maybe call it a kid's guide to their parents' cyberbullying. But because maybe we won't do that. But the point is that we really need, when we talk about safer internet, we talk about internet safety. Connect Safely is mostly oriented towards young people, but the fact is that it's something that all of us need to think about, whether we're 16 or 61 or whatever age we might be. And a lot of parents have a little to learn as well as the kids. Jacqueline, anything else you want to leave us with? We're almost out of time, but this is such a useful conversation. I don't want to cut it out too quickly.
Thank you, Larry. I just want to give one plug for our latest program that we just launched. This is something that we did 4 years ago, and I remember when we were in Philadelphia, Larry, for
Mhm.
an in-person event there. This was our inaugural Council for Digital Good that we launched, and we did it on Safer Internet Day in Philadelphia as well. We plugged for those kids out there. This is a council that we're pulling together. We're going to choose as many as 15 youth, basically teens between the ages of 13 and say 16, across the US. We want a diverse, robust set of youth that want to come together and talk about a lot of these topics. Talk about hate online, talk about violent extremism, talk about sexual risks that are out there. So these are very delicate, very sensitive subjects. But I think we all talk about the youth voice, but we don't necessarily listen to that youth voice. So I'm encouraging your listeners, if they know a teen who might be interested in this kind of a dialogue with a company like Microsoft and giving them a voice on policy issues that affect them, to apply to join our Council for Digital Good, the second installment for the 2021 class. We're going to select those teens in April. The close for the application period is March the 1st, so still plenty of time.
I hope they'll be able to get together in person sometime in the next year or two.
We're
But
hoping, we're hoping.
but it's a great program. I followed the first iteration of it, not only in the United States, as I recall, you had groups around the world, and some very, very useful data came out of that. And I'm sure some great relationships as well. Jacqueline Beauchere, Global Digital Safety Advocate at Microsoft. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Larry. Nice to be with you.